Welcome to Leadership Reimagined on True Chat, where game-changing conversations are reshaping the world of work. Here's your host, Janice Ellig.
Thank you for joining me today, where we will hear from a Wall Street professional turned journalist turned entrepreneur who founded a unique weekly public television series about sensible, long-term investing. Today's episode is a journalist's journey from Wall Street to finding best in the business investment advice. And I'm delighted to welcome my longtime friend, Consuelo Mack, the executive producer and managing editor of Consuelo Mack Wealthtrack on public television. Consuelo is the owner of Wealthtrack, the company that produces the show, and she is also responsible for raising funds, writing the program, choosing, researching, and interviewing the guests, and lends a hand in editing the weekly show. In other words, Consuelo gives new meaning to the label, the ultimate multitasker. Welcome to the show, Consuelo.
I love being here, Janice. I love your podcast. I am honored to participate in this.
Dubbed the Kramer Antidote, Wealthtrack focuses on building long-term financial security to last a lifetime. And Consuelo, we all need that.
We do.
As Money Magazine said in naming Consuelo Mack the best money TV host. When it's your money at stake, you're far better off tuning in to Mack and her thoughtful guests. Consuelo, you are seen in hundreds of markets covering nearly 90% of the country, and the program is also available on wealthtrack.com, YouTube, and as a podcast from numerous providers. Now in its 16th season, Consuelo Mack Wealthtrack is the only program on television devoted to long-term diversified investing. It is amazing that you are the only one. It is incredible with its ongoing mission to help viewers build and protect their wealth in all the investments they care about. It features insightful, in-depth interviews with the best financial minds in the business. You know, Consuelo, I've known you for a number of years, but it's only recently that I learned you were a liberal arts major from Sarah Lawrence, which I did know, but without a finance or economics course. You were not the natural for the finance world or for Wall Street, as I know Wall Street. And as you know, I'm in the executive search world. I look at executives and try and place them into the right positions. So how did you end up on Wall Street?
My family asked me the same question when I started to interview on Wall Street. And basically, growing up from an early age, I don't know where this came from, I decided that I wanted to make it in a man's world. And maybe it was because my dad was so happy and he was a doctor, loved going to work every day, and came home with all of these wonderful stories. And my brilliant mother was a traditional homemaker and was home. So I decided, which lifestyle do I want to follow? And I decided I wanted to follow my dad's. And I wanted to make it in a man's world. I didn't have any economic or business courses at Sarah Lawrence, as you said. But I realized that in order to make it in a man's world, I needed to learn something about business. My parents had paid for my college education. I wanted to be financially independent. That was very important to me. So I talked to friends, and they basically said, look, there are two places that will train you, and you can learn about business while being paid. And they were the banking industry and the brokerage industry. They had training programs, and they paid their trainees. First industry that I went to was the brokerage industry. My cousin was engaged to a broker at the time, and he just said, Consuelo, this is what you got to do. You got to go to the office wherever you go in a brokerage firm and just say, I want to make money. No matter what they ask you, just say, I want to make money. And considering that I wanted to be on my own, that was not too far from the truth. So I interviewed at several brokerage firms. Merrill Lynch and other brokerage firms were desperate to hire women at the time. And Merrill Lynch made me an offer. It's a wonderful firm. And I accepted that offer. And that's how I became a broker.
And they were desperate during the 70s to hire.
They were actually under, they were under federal, they were mandated to hire more women. So basically, I think any woman at that time walking into the office that could talk and was basically going to be hired. And that was certainly the case with me because I had no background, as I said, in finance or business whatsoever.
And when we think back, this was dark ages. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have ETFs.
No.
We didn't have much. But truly, I mean, how did you survive on Wall Street?
Right.
Without that background?
It's a good question because I was on Wall Street for about 6 years and I really didn't survive. I mean, I didn't do well as a broker.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say to the credit of the guys who were still on Wall Street at the time. This is in the 1970s, late 1970s. There had been a terrible bear market. Wall Street had shrunk dramatically. So the guys that were there were survivors. They were probably twice my age. I was making cold calls to, again, mostly men who were twice my age. And despite Wall Street's reputation as being an anti-female place, I only had really great experiences. They took me under their wing. They trained me. They helped me. I mean, they were really great. My colleagues were fabulous. I had a 40th anniversary with them a couple of years ago, and we still remain friends today.
So you learned a lot.
I learned a lot, and I chose mentors. I realized that it took me a long time to realize that it wasn't something wrong with me, that I was just not suited for the industry. And it takes a certain type to lose money for clients and not go home and cry every night, which is what I used to do.
So you didn't like that?
I didn't like that at all. And to recognize that it was the market, it wasn't me, because at the time the market was just declining no matter what. So I recognized that I needed more education. And so I went to some other top firms. I worked for Mitchell Hutchins, which is the #1 research firm in the street at that time. I was a junior analyst, an associate portfolio manager, and my job was to listen to all of the experts that they had in, Henry Kissinger being one of them, for instance, and report back to clients. And it turned out that reporting and telling clients what was happening in the world based on these experts was what I liked to do best. So I decided, my grandfather was a journalist, my brother was a journalist, still is, that I would take a couple of courses at the New School at night. I took one in print journalism, one in TV journalism, became really good friends with a person in TV journalism. And she said, look, our little station in New Jersey is looking for somebody to do market commentary for a song. They'll pay you nothing, but why don't you interview? I got hired 3 nights a week. I went out nights. I was working during the day in Wall Street. I went out to West Orange, New Jersey from the city, and I started doing market commentary. I loved it. They liked me, and they made me a full-time offer for a fraction of the salary I was making on Wall Street. But I had found my passion and my calling.
So you zigged and then you zagged. You went to Wall Street, but it taught you could speak the language of the street.
Exactly.
And then you knew, though, that you wanted to do the reporting and informing as opposed to losing money for people. That was,
yes.
You knew, let me fail fast there. Even though I could make more money on Wall Street, let me not do that. But let me take that information and then craft it for what people needed to know. How brilliant of you at an early age.
Well, I would not say it was brilliant. I honestly, Janice, it was trial and error. And for a long time, I beat myself up. And I say this to, a lot of people that I've mentored over the years, is that even the experiences that you think you're failing at, that seem absolutely miserable at the time, that you learn a lot from them. And actually, so all of the skills that you learn in adversity can actually help you when you finally figure out what you really want to do.
That's great. What a great story. So go on with this. So how do you take on stations, or what do you do? You're
right.
You're
so with the TV station that I was on in New Jersey, basically it was live TV. What I found out, the things of doing cold calls, getting rejections, those were things that stood me in really good stead as a journalist. And learning how to research stories, to report on stories, to figure out what was going on, what it meant for the markets. Again, these are all skills that I learned on Wall Street. And I went to, what do you do from a small station in New Jersey? Where do you go next? And so that was that was the question that I had. And I decided, all right, let's try to make this really professional, I went to a top agent for television personalities, for anchors. And I was told, number one, that I would never get a job on a network as a business reporter, because there were very few jobs for business reporters, and there were no women who were business reporters. And also, and I said, well, what about general news? And they said, you're too old. I was 30 at the time.
Oh my goodness.
And because the difference was that most people who went into TV at the time they were communications majors in college, and they would go to a smaller market, and they would be a street reporter or an anchor, whatever, and kind of get groomed and then go through the whole process of getting to network. And I was told that was not going to be possible for me. That was a motivator for me. And I decided that, I would show this person that, in fact, I was employable. And it turned out that in order to do the kind of journalism that I wanted to do, I needed to do it in a different structure than network news. And that's how I ended up doing some of the groundbreaking programs that I did that were venture capital financed, and that one was on cable and one was syndicated by Walt Disney, it turns out, on network television. But I created my own. I was lucky enough to be able to kind of create my own future in vehicles that were acceptable at the time. And that wasn't on network television initially.
It was cable.
It was cable.
Yeah. So you have a number of firsts here. So you had the first daily morning business program called Business Times on ESPN, and that won you the ACE Award.
Yes. Which was the top award. Our first year out, we were thrilled, was the top award given in cable.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. We had a great team. It was not just for me. It was for a very entrepreneurial team of producers and journalists. And we basically created a program, Business Times. Again, it was on ESPN because I figured that guys wanted business news. When they got up in the morning, they wanted sports and business news. That is not a novel concept now. It was a pioneering concept at the time. And so we created this program that was live. We had debates. We gave opinions. It was really a precursor to what's going on that we take for granted now in cable news.
So it wasn't scripted?
No, it wasn't scripted at all. Right. It was kind of a free for all. But I would get to work at midnight, and we went on the air at 6, and we would, pour over the news wires and discuss what we thought was important about what had happened the day before and what was happening overnight. And it was a pretty incredible experience. It was really a kind of trial by fire, but we were all journalists, and that was what made a difference. We were not readers. We had credibility. Wow.
And you also created the first morning business program on network television called Today's Business. Tell us about that as well.
Right. And so when Business Times went out of business because it ran out of funding, it turns out that some people at Walt Disney had been watching, and they really liked what I was doing specifically. And I think, again, I didn't realize what it meant to be a pioneer at the time. I didn't realize that to have a woman who was the anchor of the sole anchor, it turned out at Today's Business, but to have a woman that had credibility, that could talk guys talk, that could talk business and the markets and understand what was going on, that they thought that was a saleable project. And so they basically financed Today's Business and got me together with two wonderful producers, two men who were much older than I was. And we launched a program called Today's Business that was mostly on CBS affiliates that ran every morning, like from 6 to 7 every morning on network television. And that was a first in the business.
And that was groundbreaking because you were the first woman to anchor a daily business program on network television. Mm-hmm. And it was a leading editorial role in terms of content. And you didn't realize it at the time.
No, I just, took for granted because what I had done from my first job in television is that there was no one producing it. There was no one doing the research for me. Mm-hmm. I did it all. So I just thought, well, this must be what everyone does. And it turns out, of course, it is not what hardly anyone does until now. Now, most, I would say, business journalists, they know what they're talking about. They're not just readers, even though, a lot of them just out of necessity, have to have a producer writing the copy for them.
And that led to the Wall Street Journal promoting you to a position in Asia?
Yes. So Disney, much to its credit, backed a news program. And this was in the early days before Disney, had taken over ABC. And so Disney is an entertainment program, and they're used to products that you can run again and again. And we were a kind of a dispensable, we were a daily perishable product. And they decided it was the wrong business for them to be in. So once again, the capital evaporated. I was basically out on the street, but the Wall Street Journal had been watching the program and really liked it. And they contacted me and basically asked me, they had at the time were contracting a program with the Wall Street Journal report outside. And they said, we want to take it inside and we want to hire you to anchor it. And so that's how I ended up at the Wall Street Journal. And of course, the Wall Street Journals, they're unlike Disney and ESPN, their business was finance. And so it was nirvana. I was among colleagues. I'd never worked for an organization that was completely dedicated to business and financial news. And it was heaven. And I anchored the Wall Street Journal Report, their weekly program, for 13 years. And they had the Asian Wall Street Journal Report as well that we launched on TV. And it was the first Western business program launched in Asia. And we did a program for China. And it turns out when I went to Hong Kong for the first time that I was a rock star. I had no idea getting off the plane. The paparazzi were there. It was hysterical. We were not prepared for that because at that time in Asia, they had never seen a woman in a position of power questioning people in authority. And that's, of course, what we do naturally here. And it was a big deal in Asia and China.
What year was this about?
That at the time, it was in the early 1990s. And through until about the year 2000 is when we were doing the show in Asia.
Thank you, Consuelo. Now for a quick reminder, you are listening to a journalist's journey from Wall Street to finding best in the business investment advice with Consuelo Mack, executive producer and managing editor of Consuelo Mack Wealthtrack on public television. The topics we cover, like today's, are all current, and a new topic with a new game changer is released on the third Thursday of every month. This is a great way to stay current on relevant issues happening around us. So, Consuelo, this career that you had on network television, now you take another big leap, and you've had a great career going. But you decide to launch Consuelo Mack Wealthtrack in 2005. What prompted you? What compelled you to do this? Now you're turning to be an entrepreneur, running your own company, and you're going to script it, research it, interview all these wonderful, financial advisors on Wall Street. What made you do this?
What had happened was after I left the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal got out of television. And so they traded literally me and the Wall Street Journal Report to CNBC. And so I ended up being back in the daily news business at CNBC for a number of years and anchoring a daily news program, doing strategy sessions, doing the Wall Street Journal Report. And ultimately, when Louis Rukeyser was sick, I actually filled in for him on Wall Street Week. And when Lou died and Wall Street Week ended, I approached CNBC and I said, look, I would like to continue to do Wall Street Week, but in a different format. And Lou had actually given me his blessings before he died to continue the program. CNBC was not interested. And I credit them. It was probably the right decision for them to make because when Lou Rukeyser started Wall Street Week, he was the only game in town. And by that time, CNBC was doing daily business news. They were less interested in doing a weekly program. But I felt very strongly, having been a financial journalist for as long as I had, that what was missing in financial journalism and TV was something that was long-term oriented. The CNBCs of the world, they have to fill airtime. They have to be wedded to the market. But for individuals, I realized that in our best interests are to think long-term, have diversified investing, to be disciplined about it, to have a financial plan, to think about other assets besides stocks and bonds, And insurance was really important. And, we invest in art. We invest in collectibles. There are all sorts of things that we need to do that wasn't being covered on television. So I came up with a business plan and to do a weekly show that was devoted to long-term investing. And basically my motto is kind of to build financial wealth to last a lifetime. That's what I wanted to do for our viewers. And CNBC wasn't interested in that. However, some other people were, because I needed to have sponsorship, which means funding. And the Lou Rukeyser show was going off public television. And so they had an opening as well. So I approached some funders and I approached public television. And I found a funder in Bob Dahl, who I consider to be my guardian angel. I've had several over my career. And Bob Dahl at that time was the CEO of Merrill Lynch Investment Managers, which is called MLIM. He loved the idea. So they agreed to sponsor the program. And public television, a handful of stations agreed to take it. And that was in 2005. And now, as you said in the introduction, we are in 90% of the country. We're on hundreds of stations. So it's been it was the right mission. And that's how I became an entrepreneur, because I founded Wealthtrack Inc., which produces the program. I do all of the funding myself. Public television does not fund us, which is not unusual. Most people don't know that about public television, but a lot of the programs that come self-funded. And, we're in our 16th season, so we're doing something right.
And that was just before the financial crisis hit.
Yes.
Right. So your timing was good to launch it then.
Right. 2005 was kind of well before the financial crisis, and so luckily it was, because had it been even a couple of years later, we probably would not have gotten the funding.
Right. So you hit the ground running.
We did.
Yep. And
bull market.
Yep.
Things were good.
And you formatted it so that you wanted to have people. So you were really reimagining the whole, which I love this way of new leadership of how we get to build long-term security, financial security, going to the consumer, the average consumer.
Yes.
So that they'll have money to retire on.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And you were getting
that was the plan.
That was the plan.
Right.
And that's still the plan today.
Yes. And I also realized that the markets are so complex and our financial lives are so complex that you need, I was putting together the panel of experts that we had when I was at Mitchell Hutchins. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to, whatever the field was, it could be estate planning, it could be money management. I mentioned insurance, it could be annuities. It could be, the collectibles, financial planning, just who are the top minds in various financial fields that I could tap to help our viewers put together a financial plan for financial security to last a lifetime. And that's what I've done. And I've recognized that I can't know it all, but I know how to interview and I know how to research and I know how to find the best people. So I carefully vet the guests that we have on. We go in depth, one topic a week with one or two guests max. And so that's the plan, because there is so much noise out there. I basically wanted to distill it, and so that every week that you're going to listen to one or two top experts in one given topic, and we will give you their best advice.
Because there is a lot of noise out there, and people get confused, and then they don't even they talk about ETFs, and then they talk about alternative investments,
right?
And so you try and take a holistic approach, don't you?
Yes.
So you say every week is a different topic. So give us an example, like over the last 4 weeks or whatever. What might the topics have been, and how do you bring those topics to where people can understand them?
Right. So a couple of themes that we've been hitting on really since we started Wealthtrack, and mm-hmm. one of them is the greatest fear that most people have is running out of money in retirement. So we recently did a segment with a Wells Fargo expert on advising companies and their 401k plans and helping employees participate and make the right investment decisions. And also Christine Benz, who is a wonderful personal finance journalist at Morningstar. This is one of her pet passions as well. And so we talked about the importance of having a planning mindset and actually having a financial plan and the different stages that you go through. Planning for retirement is very different than when you're in retirement and decumulation phase, and how market volatility can be your friend when you're building up your retirement funds, but it can be your enemy when you're in retirement. So that was one of the topics that we've addressed recently. I'm also very cognizant of the fact that most of us have investing careers. You don't think about it this way, but you do. If you're starting to invest in a 401k or an IRA when you're in your 20s, our lifespans now are into our 90s. So we're talking about, 70 years or more of investing. So the great investors today, who are the next generation investors that are taking over for them? So this season, we've just done we're doing a series on next generation investors. And we're looking for firms with a culture of excellence and a culture that of a specific type of investment discipline. And if you are investing with a small cap value manager, you don't want them to decide, because small cap value is out of favor, that in 2 or 3 years they're going to turn into mid cap growth managers, because you're looking for a specific asset class to put in your portfolio. So we're looking for firms that have a defined culture and stick with that culture, and have the integrity to, no matter, even if the market's going against them, that this is what they're sticking to their last. This is what we're going to do. So we're investing. We are talking to the next generation of great investors.
So if they're value, they're value. If they're growth, they're growth.
Right.
If they're mid-size, they're mid-size. And they stick to that investment class.
And you can depend upon that. And that there are firms that have a culture of excellence that aren't going to basically start opening funds or closing funds because they're not popular. So that's what we're looking for. And we, over the years, we've definitely vetted some, terrific firms and great investors that have delivered.
Yeah. So when you have your guests on, and I've watched them, and some of them I know personally, and they're just great, you want them to give their best long-term idea for your viewers, right?
Yes.
And you ask them for an action point. Can you describe what that might look like, and what our audience and viewers now should look for on that program, your program?
So there are 2 things that you get out of every program that we have. Number one, I will say 3. You get access, number one, to a top mind in finance and or business. The second thing is that we ask each of our guests for the one investment for a long-term diversified portfolio. And what is the one thing that we should all own? And I stress a long-term diversified portfolio. And so instead of getting the 100 ideas that you might get from CNBC a day, where they're all kind of given the same sort of weight, this is like a top mind giving us, it might be an action that they take, or it might be an investment that you can make. So you come away with that to discuss with your financial advisor. And then I do an action point. So it's kind of a little bit of an overlap, but I don't give investment advice. But my action point is a takeaway from each interview that I do as to what specific action that you can take in your portfolio or your financial plan that you might want to think about. And so you come away with 2 concrete ideas. One is a specific security usually. The other one is an action that you can take.
This is great. So this is concrete advice from the experts. Can you name a few that you think, maybe aren't names, household names, but people should listen to? And when they go back look at your programs, they want to zone in on some of those speakers?
Absolutely. So what we've really tried to do, number one, Janice, you and I concur on this in our lives in general. We have a no jerks rule on Wealthtrack.
I do that in the search business too.
Exactly. So, we always have guests that not only have phenomenal professional credentials and that are respected by their peers, but that are, really are people with tremendous integrity, that they're nice and they have a passion, and we know that they're going to do the right thing for their clients. So that's kind of the first thing. But we also have a rule is that we're looking for people that don't do a lot of TV. And frequently the top professionals in any business, they don't have time to do TV and to do press. Basically, they're serving their clients. And so a lot of times we will get, for instance, we had the head of the Yale Endowment, a guy named David Swenson, on. That was an exclusive for Wealthtrack at the time. And he feels very strongly about public education and the markets. And he's a superstar. So he came on Wealthtrack because he liked the fact that it was public television and also that we do these in-depth interviews. Another guy named Charlie Ellis, who is a global investment consultant. People have him as a consultant all over the world. They pay millions of dollars to do so. He wrote a classic book called Winning the Loser's Game. He's another regular that's an exclusive. Ed Hyman, the number one economist on Wall Street for 35 years plus. And he appears exclusively on Wealthtrack to give an outlook every New Year. So those are the kind of guests that we have that rarely, if ever, do television, but they're the best in the business, and they like to come on Wealthtrack because they actually can have a conversation.
It's true. It's true. So give us a little bit about the demographics. We're going to run out of time here, but we could go in for hours on investments. I love this. Give us a little bit of the demographics of your audience.
Right.
Who are you speaking to?
So, again, this is, for potential sponsors, they're really interested in, so who's watching? They're interested in people who are educated and affluent and that act on advice that they get on Wealthtrack. And so, I think one of the things that we're most proud of is that 95% of our viewers in a recent survey say that our perspective and approach is different from other financial news programs. And the fact is that they are affluent. The vast majority of them, I think 73% have investment portfolios alone of $300,000 plus, and 34% of $1 million to $10 million. But we also, quite honestly, have a lot of people that aren't affluent and their dream is to become wealthy, to become financially secure. And those are the people that I run into on the street, on the subway, who come up to me, when I travel. And they are very grateful for the advice that we're giving them because it's trustworthy advice. We don't have a hidden agenda. And we just want people to be able to be financially secure. And who doesn't want to be financially secure? Everyone does.
So really almost anybody can tune in, right?
Yes,
and listen
absolutely.
to this advice. This is not advice that you don't understand. You understand investments and you describe it, and your guests describe this in a way in good, sound, long-term investing.
Right. And that's my job is to try to make it understandable.
You do that,
to everyone.
I've listened, yes.
And also, Janice, quite honestly, still understandable to myself.
Yes, I know.
I feel like I represent, the average person in many respects. And so that's what we're doing.
That's great. So Consuelo, for you, it's not all work. You've devoted yourself to the not-for-profit world as well. We both know each other from that world with the YMCA of Greater New York, which serves over 500,000 New Yorkers,
right? Half
of them being the youth. And you were honored by the YMCA one year, and I had the honor of introducing you. And I remember that night very vividly because you were introduced and your son, Ranger at the time, was serving in Afghanistan.
Yes, he was a Marine captain, 2 tours of duty.
And you didn't know at the time, you and your husband, Walter Mack, who didn't know at the time how he was doing, hadn't heard from him. And we had to get up there and honor you, and you were so brave. And I remember that so well because you were still there to really honor the YMCA. So, and now Ranger's back and he's a new dad.
Yes, exactly.
So with son Ranger. So that's wonderful news. But why is the YMCA so important to you when you've served on its board for so many years?
And I'm eternally grateful to Janice Ellig for getting me involved in the board of the YMCA of Greater New York. It is the largest youth-serving organization in the city. It's been around for 167 years, and it builds communities. And it is in this day and age when people don't pay attention to values, and it builds, body, mind, and spirit for every member of the Y. It turns away no child for financial reasons. And it really has these wonderful leadership programs for children. And I think the neatest thing is that it's for families. And it's a safe place where every age group can participate. And so many families, build a healthy lifestyle and one that they learn responsibility and caring and giving, and they participate in a wonderful community center. And I don't think there's any other organization like it that does it as well as it does and has done it so well for so many years.
I remember former Mayor Bloomberg said, where there's a Y, there are stronger communities.
Yes.
And it's really true.
It's
across
true.
The nation. We serve 20 million Americans. So any parting words of wisdom for us to protect and preserve our money, our financial security?
I've learned a lot over the last, 4 decades of being a financial journalist. And basically, one of the most important lessons I've learned is that we humans are very emotional creatures. And in order not to be carried away by emotion with our finances, we need a plan to keep us on track. And so this sounds very basic, but individuals and institutions tend to underperform the market because we buy high, we get really excited when there's a tech bubble, and we sell low when there's a financial crisis. We basically sell a lot of investments and we never get the money back. So to keep ourselves on the financial track, I would say have a financial plan. JP Morgan famously said that the markets will fluctuate. So I also recommend having a stash of cash to basically take advantage of market declines and, buy things when they're cheap. And also, especially if you're retired, not to withdraw money when markets are declining and to have some cash to see you through any sort of financial crisis. They do happen. They happen a lot less frequently than bull markets do. The markets normally over the years go up. So the odds are in your favor. But basically that's the advice that I would have is to, recognize you're emotional, have a plan, and keep a stash of cash to see you through tough times.
Stash of cash. I love it. So where do we find you? We want to go tune in. How do we?
Right. So number one, you can find out where we are in your area by going to wealthtrack.com, and we have a listing of all of our stations. And in New York, we're on WLIW on Friday nights, channel 21 at 7:30, and on WNET channel 13 at 8 o'clock on Saturday mornings. But we are, as I said, in 90% of the country, so you can find us by going to wealthtrack.com.
Well, thank you, Consuelo Mack, for a really insightful, informative conversation, because we're all going to be tuning in to try and protect our monies and a little bit of stash of cash. These have been great insights, a journalist's journey from Wall Street to best in the business investment advice. You have had many firsts, and you are truly reimagining how to protect our investments and retire with some true income. So for our audience, thank you for tuning in. And you can find me, Janice Ellig, on Twitter, LinkedIn, or visit our website at elliggroup.com. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes of Leadership Reimagined, game-changing conversations.